Hello, and welcome to Waves of YA, a podcast focused on YA literacy brought to you by the Ocean County Library's Teen Literacy Workgroup. My name is Lindsay, and joining me today we have Colleen and our special guest, Michael Crouch. Today's episode will be focused on queer representation in YA literature and the art of audiobook narration. Please enjoy. So, Michael, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a voice actor and audiobook narrator in New York City. I've voiced a bunch of audiobooks, and a good chunk of those have been queer young adult literature. And I also do things like commercials and the occasional anime and things like that. But the bulk of what I do is audiobooks.
Awesome. Yeah, and me and Lindsay are huge fans of yours, as we love to read audiobooks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about queer representation in young adult literature, what kind of thoughts we all have in it and what it means to us. So how might writers and educators balance freedom of expression and ethical representation? And I think what I really mean by the question is we want to see own voices. We want to hear from the actual LGBTQ community, but we also just want stories in general. And is it completely unethical to read something that was written by a cis person? And where's the line?
To me, the line is, regardless of the author's orientation, if they write their story with respect for the community that they're writing about. We can't read their minds, so it's something we have to intuit as we read. By the way, I'm a gay man. That is where I fit into the queer community, cisgender gay man. There's been many stories written about gay male teens and adults that were written by, as far as I know, straight women. Those did not bother me in the least because I felt like they did it with respect for the community, with empathy. And I see that as allyship, not appropriation or co-opting.
Yeah, that's how I've always felt also. Like, I read a lot of different books about different topics by all sorts of different authors. And I also had a question that kind of follows with that is, do writers owe everything to their fans? Do every aspect of their lives? Do they even need to talk about their sexual identity if they don't want to? There's been times where fans might get in an uproar if it's a book that seems to be written by a cisgender person, but maybe they are not out and maybe they're secretly closeted, but want to write about their life story anyway.
I don't think they have a responsibility to reveal more than they're comfortable with. I mean, there's one example. I don't want to name names, but there's an author of a story, of a novel that I narrated who is just the loveliest person. And at the time when she published the book, she identified as a cishet woman. And this story that she wrote about a gay teenager, members of the queer community got in an uproar about it. They're like, what are you doing? Like, you're not a member of our community. And she got a lot of backlash. And I thought that was not deserved because she wrote the book with such respect for the queer community and such love. That bothered me. And as time went on, it turned out that actually she is queer, but she wasn't ready to come out. And I did not like how all of that played out. I was not there for every step of the story, but the bits and pieces and the steps that I saw, it really bothered me.
Yeah, it's horrible to force your real life to be what you write about when maybe that's your outlet and that's a different aspect of your life. So yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said.
It's interesting because there are so many people who do get in an uproar, who I kind of agree with both of you, as long as it's done well and in good taste and your heart is in the right place and with respect, like Michael said. It's interesting because we often visit the high school across the street and we attend their GSA meetings, and we asked the teens there and they said they would rather have some kind of representation than none. They didn't care. I'm sure there are some standards there, but it's interesting to hear kids say that, because when I hear about people getting on people's back for not writing from their own voice, I automatically assume it's the younger generation, that it's, that's making these demands.
That's interesting to hear.
These kids are like, no, we're cool with it, as long as you make us look good. So I think that's an interesting point of view too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think as long as we're not shunning the writers that are own voices, as long as we're also uplifting them, because they could possibly get lost in the shuffle. If a really popular author decides to start writing about a topic, other authors might not get as much time in the spotlight. So there's like a balance where you want to hear, like,
Yeah.
I want to hear our own voices, but then I also want to see different people in almost everything I read. And we are seeing a lot in a lot of different YA books, a lot of different genres.
Yeah, that's a good point. And on a similar topic, generally, I don't have a problem with straight actors playing gay roles in movies and TV, as long as they do it with respect and love and their heart's in the right place. Someone like Eric Stonestreet on Modern Family, I think, did wonderful work, just wonderful. And from what I've read, he is a straight dude. But the one time where I might reconsider my stance on that is, yeah, if a gay actor's opportunities are limited to gay roles and the straight men are taking them, then I'm like, ugh, well, I don't like that. In my line of work, in voiceover, there's a lot of flexibility. I voice lots of straight characters, even though I'm gay. So I don't feel like I'm limited to that if a straight guy, narrates some gay teen novel. So I'm fortunate in that respect in my line of work.
Colleen and I were talking about how people in your line of work, audiobook narrators, voiceover actors in general, like reading for the opposite gender or different gender.
It's majorly different. Like, say, if it's an entire section of an audiobook that's written from a character's point of view that's the opposite gender of yours, that might be a stretch. But if it's a third-person narrative or a first-person narrative where a dialogue from other characters comes in, I mean, you can't always have another actor do just that dialogue. I mean, come on. As long as the narrator, again, the respect comes in, like you're not making fun of the character. You're not making a caricature out of them. You're approaching it as empathetically as possible, empathically. And also in that key, if we're getting into the nuances of it, that's when subtlety really comes into play when you're in front of the mic. That's when you trust the mic is very sensitive and it's going to pick up all those little nuances. So if I just very lightly give that feminine touch to my voice, that's going to read as something natural and that's going to flow without being distracting or disrespectful.
It's really funny to think that because I listen to so many audiobooks, it's so natural for men to be doing the female roles that, like, I wonder if somebody who doesn't listen to audiobooks finds it odd. Like you were saying, it would be silly for like you to be talking and then just some other random person come and be like, well, hi, I'm here today, but they're silly.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so normal. But I wonder, like, looking in, what other people think. Just interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm immersed in it. So my perspective is from someone who lives inside it most days.
So without getting into specifics, have you ever narrated a book that included a portrayal of a stereotype for comedic effect that was almost possibly offensive?
I have not. Again, I can only speak from my perspective with my identity within the queer community as a cisgender gay guy. There have been books where there have been very funny, queeny, bordering on stereotypical gay men. But I always felt that it was done with, I keep saying this over and over again, but with respect. And if it was funny, it was funny. And if it was meant to be funny, it did its job. And, we can't read the author's mind. We don't know what their intentions are, but never at any point have I felt like the author's intention was to shame or ridicule the queer community. So times when characters like that have come up, I was not the least bit offended or uncomfortable.
Have you ever not taken on a job because what you've read was offensive? Or does it really not get that far?
That hasn't happened. I will say, without going into the exact title, in 2016, I was cast in a role that was a first-person narrative, a young trans girl. I was hired to do the job, and I did it to the best of my ability with as much respect and empathy that I could bring to it. I think now, only 7 years later in 2023, I probably would not be offered that job. 2, if I were, I would have reservations about taking that. I might turn that down to give a trans person an opportunity to do that role. At the time, it was just, I was hired to do it, and I was like, great, I'll do it. And I'll do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah, and now there are hopefully more opportunities for people. Maybe you don't have to turn down as many of roles because they're being offered to the proper people.
Yeah, that's great.
My favorite genre is fantasy. Do you think that there's more freedom for authors to write about different genders and different backgrounds and different diversity, just different people in general?
I'd say, yeah, there's more freedom in a fantastical environment. But from what you can tell from my perspective so far, I'm not very rigid when it comes to this. Even if it's contemporary, realistic fiction, I'm not going to be offended if straight woman or whoever is writing about a gay teen or a gay man. So from my point of view, it's, again, as long as they do it with love.
Yeah, I think that's really the consensus is as long as it's done with integrity, it can really work.
I understand when some people get upset if it's not all own voice written, because you do want to lift up those voices, of course. But the way I see it, I see allies. If they're writing a story about our community and they're doing it with love, I don't care where they come from, anywhere in that spectrum. I see it as allyship.
Have you ever read a book with the character and you're like, that is so much like me, or like I really see myself in that character?
Oh, totally. That happens a lot. And sometimes it's a character that's a straight kid, but just personality-wise, they're so much like me. And I voiced gay characters, teens and those my age, who are very different from me.
So you're just a jack of all trades, sounds like. And that's why you're our favorite audiobook narrator.
Yeah, but also it comes down to personality more than sexual orientation or where you fit into the queer community. I mean, that's just one small element of it. You know, we're all people with different personalities. That's what my work comes down to. More than creating voices, it's tapping into the personality of this character who's speaking.
Yeah, and that's why people shouldn't really be afraid to read a gay book, because it's just a story where the person happens to be an aspect of their characterization is different than what you might be experiencing. But it's still, at the end of the day, there's good books and bad books, and there's a lot of good books out there that are different characters than you.
Yeah.
Does that I might have been rambling at the end there.
No. What you're saying makes sense. And also, there are some people who write first-person narratives of a character that's the opposite gender or queer when the author's not queer. They do it with varying levels of skill. Some just nail it. They just nail that other person's voice. And I have a lot of respect for the way they're able to just dive in and really empathize with this other character. Sometimes, though, I'm like, nice try. I did one book not too long ago. It was written by a straight, middle-aged woman, but it was a first-person narrative of a 24-year-old gay guy. It was a good book. She's a great writer. It was well written. But as a gay man, I was like, gay guys do not talk like this, especially young ones. I wasn't offended. I was just like, good effort. But like, it's just not quite there.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I was talking a little bit about this. I'm still waiting for the perfect librarians, about a librarian that's in her mid-30s living at the Jersey Shore. And I'm sure I would nitpick that. Like, no, we didn't. And it's almost like historical fiction or a specific locale. You have to get so much right if you're not really from there, or if you're not like, we haven't been around in the 1820s Scotland. So you have to really do your research.
Yeah.
So if that's the kind of writer you're going to be, it's important to be authentic and have at least a background of what you're talking about.
Yeah. And with this particular book, though, I was filled with a sweet feeling. Like, I was glad that she tried. I knew her intentions were good. So no part of me was upset in any way.
It is interesting that people are compelled to tell these stories that are maybe not their lived experience. So, like you said, you want to be like, yay, like you tried, good effort, better luck next time. Maybe it'll get better. But it's kind of nice to know that people outside of those communities care enough to keep telling stories and keep, writing about those different lifestyles than their own. It's interesting that people want to get to know, even as an author. I'm not an author, but I feel like authors often, they have to do so much research to tell a story. And I think it's really interesting that people want to take the time to just learn about others and be able to like wear their shoes for a little while. Definitely makes for more empathy in the world. And like we've been saying all along, if it's done the right way, can really be beneficial, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly my perspective. That's where my instincts go when I react to something like that. It's not as combative as some other people. Like some people just see something like that and say, oh, they're taking advantage of our culture and our community. And again, we can't read their minds, the author's minds, but uh, that's not where my gut takes me when I see that happening. I see allyship.
Yeah, I was telling Colleen earlier today about a book I read. It's not an American author, and they live in another country, obviously, and their book's not published in the States, but I happened to order a copy because I had read their first book and I loved it. So their second book was about a trans character, and they are not trans. And it felt like their whole country came for them. Like there was
Yeah.
so much backlash for this author and their story they wrote. And I read the book and I personally thought it was well written. I can't really speak to a trans person's experience, but they defended themselves and they, are saying the same kind of things that we're saying today. They wanted to educate themselves about this lifestyle. They had been inspired because their sibling helped a trans teen. They talked them off of a ledge, literally. There was a kid on a bridge or something. And so he felt compelled to like look further into a trans teen's life and tell that story. But he had done lots of research. He had quite a big trans community behind him and supporting him and helping him write
Oh,
the
that's
story.
good. That's good.
Yeah. And then something else was brought up that I had read about with this author in this book was, well, why didn't they co-write this story with a trans author? Which is
Uh-huh.
interesting. So, I mean, I guess not everyone has the connections, or what are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously we're saying that's not necessary, but and I'm would venture to guess that it would be beneficial, but what do you think about co-writing or finding someone who does come from that community or is that own voice to attach to your project?
I think that's good. And when someone has the connections and the resources to do that, and also as a way to cover their ass from people who are going to lash out at them. I mean, because some of this lashing out that happens, I think it's really unwarranted and unfair. And let's be real. I mean, most authors are not getting rich. They're not like getting rich off the backs of the queer community. Unless you're wildly successful, then maybe you're making a lot of money on your written work.
Yeah, I think there just should be lots of stories written by all sorts of different people, and people will choose what they want to read. And I don't think there's anything wrong with critiquing authors either, if they're able to
Yeah.
listen to what somebody's saying and maybe change that for their next book too. But just the blind hatred and attacking is usually not very helpful. And I think it is usually a minority angry voice, just as we see in
Yeah.
anything.
So you said, Michael, that you do also other voiceover work. Would you say it's similar climate? Like you have to kind of be very careful of what jobs you take, and like anime, I'm wondering how that is compared to your audiobook work. Do they look into that, or is it just like voice actor work and you don't have to worry about can I represent this character and so on?
With stuff like anime and animation, a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time you're just doing your one role, maybe others, but they're focused on casting a particular role. And your agent knows you and knows if you're the right fit for it. And they have so many choices. So if casting requests that they're looking specifically for trans actors, only trans actors will get that audition. Usually I don't really have to think too much about it because the stuff that I get is just like cookie cutter right for me. And with audiobooks like we talked about, there's flexibility because you're doing multiple characters and jumping back and forth and back and forth.
Do you have a preference? Do you like audiobooks better than animation, or do you want to be on screen? What's your thing?
Well, I do all voiceover. I have no dreams of being on camera. My background is in theater, and even that, I don't need to be on stage. I'm content to be in the audience. I love being in the booth in front of the mic. And audiobooks are my home in this world. I do and have done other stuff like I talked about, but there's something special about the craft of audiobooks that really, really speaks to me. And I'm content to keep doing that.
I hope you do it forever.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
we'll keep listening.
Do you have a number off the top of your head of how many books you've done?
Yeah, I keep a count. I
Oh,
keep a
wow.
list. Just like 360 something right now. That includes full cast productions where I only had a small role. So those
Mhm.
are not all solo reads,
I see.
but that is the total.
Do you like make friends with the other narrators? I like imagine all my favorite narrators as one big friend group, especially when they're on the same book.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do have narrator friends, and it's rare that we get to interact, even virtually. But sometimes, like, there were just these industry events that took place back in March that were in person for the first time in 3 years. And it was amazing. It felt so good to be with everyone in person and just that sense of community. You can't do that virtually. And especially when, even when you are connected, you're only hearing each other. You're not even seeing each other. Even though our opportunities to interact are few and far between, when we are able to, it feels really good.
That's awesome.
Yay. Do you ever teach classes on how to be a narrator?
I haven't
You
yet.
should. You
Maybe
should teach.
maybe one day.
I'll
Yeah.
sign up.
Yeah. Yeah, I am curious to diversify within the audiobook field and do more things like that.
I think I found one resource because it's like one of my lifelong dreams to be an audiobook narrator.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, and I think I found one resource and it is real old and I don't know if it's relevant anymore, but it was a lot of information on one page. So I would like a class. If you're ever going to do a class, let me know.
Yeah. I I'm love hearing that you would be interested
For
because
sure.
I do love to talk about the work.
Oh, cool.
I find it fascinating.
I do too. And I find it so appealing. Colleen does too.
Yeah.
Colleen just
It's just
decided she likes her voice now.
I finally got used to listening to my voice.
Oh yeah?
Like yeah. Oh yeah, does it ever bother you to hear your voice all the time? Or have you gotten used to it?
Well, I have no choice but to get used to it. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm way less to seeing myself on video. Not that I look like a troll or anything, but like, I'm just not used to it. I'm just not used to it. But I hear myself all the time played back. I play things back and tweak them, and I do that constantly. So
Hmm.
that's easy.
I feel
Yeah.
like I am like we make virtual content for work to post on social media. And Colleen and I are two of the only people who do voiceover with our videos. And I feel like I'm the same way when I do recordings. I like constantly like, oh no, have to go back and fix that.
I had to
Mhm.
re-record so many things because my voice, I all of a sudden had a southern accent for some reason. Or like,
Yeah. Yeah, those things happen. Um, when I do my work, you guys only hear the finished product, but there are many, many outtakes, lots of tweaks and edits that go into it.
So do you only listen to it as you're making corrections and fixing things? Do you ever listen full on when it's all complete?
I do.
You
I do
do?
on some from my favorite. Well, in the very beginning, when my
Yeah.
resume was small, I listened to everything. One, because I was curious, also nervous and self-conscious. Now that I've done many, many more, I don't listen to everything. I'd go crazy.
Okay.
But I do go back and listen to ones that I really loved.
Yeah.
And
Do you have
also, if the stakes are really high, like if it's one that's really special to me and it comes out, I want to hear it. I want to hear what other people are going to hear so that I can register how I feel about it before I hear anyone else's thoughts, good or bad.
yeah. Do you have any that you'd be willing to name that are your favorites that you've
Oh,
done?
yeah. Oh, yeah. So with young adult, one of the first ones I did, like number 7 out of that 300 plus, was Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda. A great queer YA title.
Mm-hmm.
That's a favorite of mine. As far as adult titles go, The Great Believers by Rebecca Mackay. That's a favorite. A debut novel by Lydia Fitzpatrick called Lights All Night Long. It's another favorite. I gotta add in middle grade too.
Yeah.
There's this book called Wink by Rob Harrell that I just loved. I loved it so much.
Okay.
And a
Yeah,
queer
write that
middle
down.
grade.
We're always looking for middle grade books.
Yeah. And a couple of great queer middle grade titles. The Best Man by Richard Peck.
Oh, I have that. I haven't read it.
Oh, that's a great book. And The Language of Seabirds is a pretty recent one by Will Taylor. I thought it was lovely. And this is one that's on some censorship ban lists. Middle School's a Drag, You Better Work by Greg Howard.
Oh my God, that sounds great.
It is. I love it. It's great.
I love a good title.
Yeah, I highly recommend that one.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I can't remember the first time I heard you on a book because I will actively look for books that you narrate.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, you're one of my like top 5. I have, a few.
He name drops all the time.
I'm always like, oh, that's this narrator. That's that narrator. Brittany Presley's one of my other favorites.
Oh, I know Brittany, yeah.
Yeah, she's awesome. You know Brittany. She did Be Not Far From Me, Colleen.
That's right. I love her.
Mhm.
She has to tell me the book that they're in, and then I remember. She's a good one.
I think it's so fascinating. I'm not interested in voiceover work for like TV or anything. I just want to read books. I think it's super cool.
Yeah, I do too. There's something really special about it.
So do you do much reading at all? You probably don't, right? Because you're probably reading books all day long for work.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
haven't read for fun in a long time.
Yeah. But it's so
That
nice.
must stink.
You're getting so much reading done anyway. So
It's true. I'm about to go on a 2-week European vacation. So I may actually read a paperback book for pleasure.
Nice.
First time in a long, long time.
Yeah.
But I haven't been
excellent.
on a 2-week vacation in many years.
Yeah, that's really nice. That's gonna be great.
Well, I hope you have a wonderful time. I'm sure you will. I mean,
Yeah. We'll hit Greece and Italy.
nice.
Ooh.
I want to go to Greece so bad.
Yeah. Well, I want to go to both. I haven't been anywhere in Europe, so. But yeah, I really want to go to Greece though. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, have a wonderful trip,
Thank you.
and I'll listen for more books from you soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you.
Good chatting with you again.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Be sure to check out the Ocean County Library's website for more podcasts and events. Any titles mentioned in today's episode can be found at the Ocean County Library, free with your library card. Until next time, happy reading.